Hey, we want to talk about man-to-man this morning and just give you some kind of pointers to get you kind of thinking and launched. And we've got a number of needs, especially around recruiting, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But as a lot of you guys know, well, let me just ask a show of hands. How many of you guys went through man-to-man at the Crowne Plaza? Let me just see. Okay. All right. There's a few hands in there. Not as many as actually I thought, but we did man-to-man at Crowne Plaza last year. And the ballroom held about 250, and we filled it up every week for 11 weeks. It was a lot of energy, a lot of excitement in those meetings. And afterwards, when we were finishing on the last week, we gave all the guys in the room an evaluation because we wanted to know what they thought about it, especially the young guys. There were a lot of young guys there, and get a feel for what their experience has been. And I want you to know, since so many of you weren't there, that was one of the most encouraging things we did, get that evaluation, because the guys reported back to us how much they enjoyed it. I didn't know how much we would connect, especially with the younger guys, although the material is pointed towards them. But they gave us really high marks that we were hitting on issues that they wanted to hear about and know about and talk about and enjoy. But the thing that stood out the most as we did those evaluations was the table leaders, which is the role you're going to play. Usually when you start something that early in the morning, week to week, we did it 11 weeks last year, you'll have some tail off. You know, you'll see a big crowd at the beginning, and then it'll kind of thin out, and hopefully there'll be not a big decrease, but there's always a decrease. We actually, over 11 weeks, had an increase. And when you talk to the young guys about it, a lot of that involved the guys who were sitting there, the older men who were there to kind of encourage and speak into the lives of those young men around the table. Another thing that we observed, especially since I've been doing men's ministry for so many years, is that when 7:30 came around, we always try to stay right on time, start at 6, end at 7:30. We use music to kind of start the event and end the event. And when we used to do men's fraternity, when 7:30 would roll around, the music would play, it would clear out pretty quick. But one of the things I noticed at the Crowne Plaza that really I'd sit and I'd look and I'd go, this is so good, is that we would end at 7:30, and some guys would of course get up because they need to go to work. That's what we're trying to do, is get them to work on time. But I'd look back at about 7:50, 8 o'clock, and there would still be tables having their discussions with the young men that were there. So to say all that is just simply to say your presence here today means a lot, and whether you know it or not, your involvement of what goes on when we actually launch man-to-man in January is going to be really the feature role, because your relationship with those guys, how you speak into their lives, and just being there for those millennial guys in particular who love the up-close relational interaction is going to be very critical. I want to talk just a little bit about the specifics of your role. Francisca, thank you for being here. We have Francisca Jones of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette joining us today. She wanted to know if men really got up this early to talk about manhood. Can somebody get her a seat? There you go, good. We want to talk a little bit about just a few specifics, and I want you to know what you signed up for. We're not going to load you up and make this feel heavy, but I do think some clarity really helps us as getting started. So I want to put some things on the board between now and January 9th that I just would call your table leader responsibilities. Again, they're pretty simple, but it'll help you to identify them. Russell will get this to you as well, but we want to talk about each one of those. The main thing we need, let me just tell you, the main thing we need from you is help filling out your table with 8 men, preferably between the ages of 20 and 40. Some of you guys, that's not a big deal. Maybe you've already made the connection and filled your table up. But for a number of you, you're going to say, you know, how do I connect with those guys? How do I pull them in? That's what we really need right now, is help by you reaching out, drawing in, and filling out your table with guys between 20 and 40. And here's 3 ways you can do that, okay? First of all, over the next 3 weeks, You can network, and for some of you, if you've got sons who are, in that 20-plus age, you can invite them to join you and kind of be a part of your recruiting process and let them use their network to find guys that you can talk to invite personally. And that would be a good way to do it. Plus, you get involved your son in that. Maybe you work at an office where there's a younger man who you do have a good relationship with, and you think, hey, he could be a help. You could pull him aside. We've got all these flyers. You've got one on your table that gives you all the information about the event in January, and actually week-to-week subject matter as well as how to sign up. But we can have as many as you want of these, but you can use that to talk to somebody in your office or a friend or relative about joining you, and then use that network to reach out to guys between now and January 9th to join you. Okay, so that's one way you can recruit. Second, you can look around the room. Maybe there's a table leader that's here in the room that you know, and if he's filled out his table, he may know some additional young men who are looking to join him, and he has no more room, and you can offload him by taking some of the guys who are wanting to be a part of this, but he doesn't have room for them. So you can actually use other guys here in the room to recruit guys to join your group. And then, of course, we got Russell back there, kind of is the core coordinator for everything that's taking place in January. And so you can talk to Russell. He'll have guys call in and want to sign up, and they'll just be hanging out there, and they're wanting to get a table. And Russell can start the personal connection with you. And guys, it's really important. This is what I want to say. Between now and January 9th, it's really important that we recruit and use whatever means we can to get guys to join us from any means. Just like yesterday, I was on the buzz at 7 o'clock in the morning with David Basil, and he just jokingly said to the audience, the radio audience, that some of the wives could give a Christmas present by signing their husbands up for man-to-man, and some did. So there's some guys out there that don't even know they're in a group, and they're going to find out they're in a group, and then they're going to need a table, and maybe a call from you, just a warm call saying we'd love to have you at our table, and you could introduce yourself and begin that relationship. It'd be great, because those guys are going to walk in. I'm just telling you, like they did last year, they're going to be clueless of what's really going on, other than the issue that this is around manhood, and we're trying to lay a good foundation for clear manhood, especially for younger men, so they can live a life without stumbling through life. We can take some of the dead ends out and make it a smoother road. And so that's what we want to talk about. And of course, with the flyer you've got in front of you, you can identify certain subject matters of what we're talking about, so that they hear some of those things. Just yesterday on the buzz, when I started talking about dad, and then started talking about marriage and stuff like that, everybody kind of perks up. In fact, we had Miss Arkansas in the room with us, and after it was over, after we did our little segment, it was just interesting because, of course, she was there just to provide a little color, but when we were off air, she turned to me, and here's what she said: "Can you find me one of those guys who really wants to live as a man?" That's what she said to me. I was just talking about a guy who is better understanding, his own manhood, the world of women, how to be married. And she said, "Are single guys coming to that?" I said, "Yeah, there'll be single guys." I'd like a guy like that. So I just want you to know, we talk at this level, all this modern, cool talk and stuff like that, but underneath the surface flow real themes of life. The real themes of life. And that is, how can I have intimacy? And how can I be restored to my father that I hadn't talked to in 10 years? And how can I deal with these things I'm feeling and I don't know what to do with them? I can't even articulate them well. A man-to-man journey is to kind of surface those kind of issues to the top, help guys identify and know that they're not as scary as you think, but also by identifying them, helping them know what they can do to make those things work for them rather than against them. And that's what's really going on in our culture today. So you can use Russell to help you. Russell will be a great help in that regard. Also, make sure, this is the second responsibility between now and then, make sure that each of the young men who will be at your table, let's say you've got 5 or 6 guys and you're recruiting some others, but as you do that, it's just real important to put in their minds this is a 10-week journey that builds on itself. So it's not 10 independent messages, it's 10 interconnected messages that's kind of laying this groundwork for manhood. And they need to be paid up before January 9th so we can start that way. Now, it's $12 a session, $120 for the 10 weeks, and you go, okay, so this is a paid event. Just so you know, and because somebody might ask you about this, that fee is for their breakfast only. No one's being paid. There are no royalties being obtained. No one's giving me an honorarium or Russell an honorarium for anything. The Embassy Suites has been really good at helping us because it's kind of a downtime of their year of letting us have the auditorium for a nominal price. But the breakfast is kind of how they get their return. But for those guys coming in, they'll get the talks and the notes and all that gratis. What they're paying for when that breakfast comes is their breakfast every week for those 10 straight weeks. But it's important to get them signed up before January 9th and have them committed to that. Also, you need to make sure that each of your young men understand in advance where to park. I don't know if you've been to the Embassy Suites, but it's a little bit confusing. When you drive up, it looks like it's got very limited parking. There's actually a parking deck kind of on the back side. Russell's going to provide you a map when he comes up after I'm finished. But the start, here's what I've learned. It's always good to have a good start. And so rather than the first week being this real confusing time where guys are driving around trying to park and we start at 6 and they're getting in at 6:20 or 6:30 because they couldn't find a place and didn't know where, you're going to give them a map a week or more out and help them understand that and understand that the starting time is always going to be at 6 a.m. We're going to stay real crisp in that regard. And for the first session, because they need some orientation, I'll even need some orientation, it'd be good to be there at 5:45, kind of find your way around, get in the deck, work your way over to the hotel, get into the room where we're going to be meeting, and be there at least enough time to grab a cup of coffee and find who your group is and sit down at the table. So when I stand up and start, most of the guys are in place, and we'll do a real good job of trying to start it off well so it feels good. Because here's what I've learned. If the first session feels good, then it's a real draw to keep coming back, okay? And of course, we've got to deliver the goods. I know that, but I think we can because of what we did this last year. But that start, I just want to say as a table leader, that start is critical. Okay, then a second responsibility revolves around not leading up to January 9th, but what your responsibility will be each of the 10 sessions starting January 9th when you sit down. So here, and again, I'll just list these. First, here's the first. Be in your seat at 6 o'clock. You're the leader. So rather than be out there milling around and we're calling you back, you be calling your guys to the table and be in your place as best you can by 6 a.m. And here's the way the schedule will fall out each week. At 6, Russell will make maybe a couple introductory remarks, call guys to attention, that kind of thing. Then I'll step up and speak. The guys will already have notes around the table, so their notes will be there, and they'll be looking at them. And then I'll get and speak from about 6:10, and sometimes it'll be 6:50, 7 o'clock. It depends if I got a lot of hot air, to get through it. Some of this material to me is so rich, it's hard to stop once you start. But I'm going to be shooting to be finished around 7 o'clock. Okay, when 7 o'clock comes and I'm stepping down, you'll ask one of your table leader guys to get up. The Embassy Suites is going to have the breakfast buffets are all around us. So they'll go and get a tray of the breakfast food and bring it to the table, and you'll already go start your discussion. And your discussion will go from 7 to 7:30 off of the session that I just gave, and you'll interact with them. And of course the question is, well, how do I interact with them? The way you interact with them is at the end of each outline are 3 or 4 questions that you'll just ask the group. Now you don't have to go by the numbers 1, 2, 3. It's not a legalistic kind of thing. You may ask a question and that leads to a great discussion off of that question, and you may never go back to the other questions on the sheet. But those questions are just simply to help you get started, and it'll be something like this. To finish the session and go, man, that was a great session. I really enjoyed this point. guys, and then you look at your outline and say, you know, what was the thing that impacted you the most in this session? And then they start talking, and you call on them, and then the discussion starts. If it starts calming down, you go to the next question, and you try to finish it out. One of the things I observed, you won't have problems with the discussion. They'll jump into it, they'll be interacting, and you'll be guiding it. And so don't feel any restrictions, just enjoy the discussions and use those discussion questions to back you up. But that's really the outline every week. We start at 6, okay, introductory remarks, then I talk. When I'm finished, we go to small group discussions with breakfast. So they're going to be eating while you're discussing, and they get a chance to enjoy that breakfast till 7:30. When 7:30 comes, we'll play loud music. What that tells everybody is regardless of where you are, because guys got different work schedules, you're free to get up and leave. That gives you an end point where if I got to get to work, I take off. Okay? If the guys want to stay and you have time to stay, you can stay as long as you want. Don't feel that anybody's going to rush out of the room, but that's how the schedule falls week to week. And that consistency, again, builds confidence with the guys that they know they're getting in and getting out and how it's going to work. And after about the second week, everybody's real clear how this thing is going to go. Secondly, as a table leader, well, I mentioned that about the questions. Then third, you need to follow up any guys who miss a session. And the reason we like to have 2 table leaders is because for some of you, you're going to miss a session. And again, that's okay because you have backup. But we want 1 table leader there every week for sure. But for those who miss a session, we're going to be filming it. And what Russell will do after we film it, he'll make a few little adjustments to the thing and put it on YouTube and then send you a link as table leader. And so if George had to go on a business trip to Charlotte and he missed, you can simply, as a table leader, call George and say, hey, we missed you. We wish you were there. We don't want you to get behind. Here's the link on YouTube that you can go and watch the session you missed. And you'll have that by the end of the day that we do that morning. And so they can watch it on YouTube. It's real simple to do. They just have to click on the link and I come up and speak and they'll get it so they don't fall behind. In the same way for you, if you miss, you'll have the YouTube video to be able to keep up with what's going on. And Russell's going to send you that link each week. And then lastly, number 4, be willing to meet outside these sessions. If you could just say, you know, I'm willing to tithe a little time outside the sessions to meet with any guy around my table that may struggle with one of the sessions, may have some questions about it. We're talking about things that maybe disturb him because we're going to plow some ground and that surface things that guys have been repressing, although they've been expressing those things on the surface of their life and not even clear about the connection. Okay? And principally, right at the beginning, about 2 weeks in, we have a session on dad and have the men think about their relationship with their fathers. And what I've learned is the minute you pop that top, okay, stuff comes out. And it may be good stuff, and they share things that Dad did with them that built a strong connection, that they've built a strong life off of. But what you need to know is when you look in the room, with however many guys are in there, you can pretty much bank on it that 1 out of every 2 guys has some pain there. Either a broken relationship with Dad, a painful relationship with Dad, or a wound because there was no Dad. All right? And they've never thought about how it's impacting their life in the day-to-day, but it is having an impact. And I'm going to draw that landscape for them a little bit. And when it comes time to talk about that, as we saw in Man to Man back at the Crown Plaza, there are going to be some guys who you're going to watch them tighten up, and they don't want to talk about it, but they do want to talk about it. And then there are going to be other guys who are just, all of a sudden, it's just going to kind of blurt out. And for some of those guys, and you can just use your instincts in that, you don't have to be a psychologist or a counselor, but you can be a listening ear. And that's so helpful. And so it may be later in the week you can call Pete and say, hey, I saw you really struggling with that. Could we get a cup of coffee and talk about it? And like to hear more. And maybe all he does is tell you his story. And it's real healthy to get it out in that regard. And there'll be maybe some other things along the way, like a guy in my group secretly was planning a divorce. And then we came to the section on defining manhood. In particular, one of the points is in regards to the woman in your life and how to be married and what your responsibility is as a man in that regard. And it began to rock his world a little bit because his world secretly was unraveling in regards to his marriage, and he needed somebody to talk to. So just be on the lookout for that. And again, I don't want you to feel any pressure that you got to be a counselor, but I just would say be willing to listen, because that's a huge healing element. And Russell and I are here to help any of you if you come across something that really concerns you and you just want to use us to say, hey, what do I do with this? Now, for the most part, it's going to be light and on the surface and fun, and there's going to be information that's going to create energy and excitement, and guys are going to be talking about it, and we're moving guys towards the end point, and the end point, which our theme is to be a better man. We're moving to a place where we're going to ask the guys every week to think about an application that could upgrade their manhood off of the session, just to take a little note. And at the end of the time, they're actually going to fill out on a little card 3 steps that they could take to be a better man in light of this 10-week journey. But real specific, that they can use as kind of a wheel alignment, if you will. I mean, it might just be, spending more time with my wife and having more getaway time because I'm working all the time. And I need to make that adjustment because that area of my manhood is suffering. It may be, for the first time, I've got a little bit better plan to be a dad. Or maybe it's, I need to go talk to my dad about our relationship. There can be all kinds of applications. But the point is that we're moving for them not just to hear the information, but to actually process it over 10 weeks and then to choose 3 things that we can do to be a better man. That make sense to everybody? So that's the way these things are gonna fall out. So just be willing to provide some time in that regard for these guys. So that's it. Those are the responsibilities of being a table leader between now and January 9th. Just want to say it again, if I can just, this is recruiting season, by the way. Yesterday I was a little disappointed. I found Nick Saban was really disappointed with where his ranking was in recruiting. But it's recruiting season, and we want to go after the 5 stars. Okay? So there's some guys out there who are 5-star recruits who they're right, they're just launching. They think they know it all, but they're just launching out there into manhood. They got a job, they just got married or whatever, and boy, they need this information. Because what they don't realize is both engines of their manhood doesn't have any fuel in it. So they're headed for a disaster, and they need something to kind of clarify the landscape, remove the fog. And for some of those guys, as you'll hear me say in one of the messages, some of those guys need to deal with the dark manhood. Okay? So we're just trying to create a generation of guys who, by investing in being a better man, a generation of guys who can do, not perfect, a little bit better. Because here's what I want you to know. Men who are just a little bit better do a whole lot of good.